Hello, Rockbridge Leadership. This is the first in a series of conversations we're going to have about the evolving role of leadership at Rockbridge Church. We're going to base these series on conversations and dialogue that we've had at the retreat we had 2 or 3 weeks ago, at our first Bible study recently, and we'll continue to build this network as we move forward. Today, we're going to talk about the role of the pastor. And I want you to take a look. Attached to this video are some online questions. Answer those questions so that we can engage in some dialogue even outside of our regular meeting times as we learn and grow together. And so today I'm here with our pastor, Wade Killow. And Wade, one of the questions that I had after the retreat was, what is the role of the pastor? I mean, as everybody comes to this from his or her own experience, right? And so in my experience, the pastor would show up on Sunday and would deliver the message, and we would essentially cheer or say amen, and most of the time,
cheering, really?
occasionally,
Wow.
occasionally, very rarely, actually, very rarely. But I know other folks see the role of the pastor in that pastoral care, that they want somebody whom they can talk with and really intimately know, or even to, like, almost therapy. Like, I need to go and visit with the pastor every week, and we need to sit down together, and we need to do this all the time. Other folks see the role of the pastor as a rah-rah guy, that y'all can do this, move forward, and should always be positive, and should always be kind of soft and fuzzy, and I mean, just everybody comes to this in a little bit different role, with a preconceived notion based on whatever history we've had. So, in your view, though, as in this particular context, as we're shifting this ministerial role at Rockbridge Church, what do you see as the role of the pastor?
All of the above and more. Right. The role of the pastor primarily is to be the spiritual head of the church, the spiritual leader. And to be the spiritual leader of the church, of course, encompasses pastoral care. It encompasses rah-rah. It encompasses a lot of things, a lot of different components, and we can't just make one particular component the overall component. The overall component for any pastor is to be the spiritual head or leader of the church. And it's a calling. And we talked about calling at our last study that we had with leadership. And not only are leaders called, those lay people in the church, those people that are not ordained in ministry like a pastor, we call them lay leaders. Not only lay leaders, but pastors are called also. And we're called to that task of shepherding God's people that are already here, but also those people that He will bring into the fold. And we're to lead them spiritually. And so that means that we have an opportunity, unlike most other people in the church, to really see the overall scope of the church and how it is that we're fulfilling our vision, which is to engage the community, to transform the community by being a deeply committed, Christ-centered, Christ-like community. And so the pastor's role is to make sure that vision is always out before the church, so that as we make decisions, we're always keeping in mind that this is our job, this is our vision, this is what God has called us to be, so that we can fulfill our ultimate mission, which is to continue the ministry of Jesus Christ and make disciples in His name. And so that the pastor plays that role in collaboration and in consultation with the church board.
Well, that's exactly my next question. So, what's the point then of a church board? I mean, how does that? We've got the pastor, we've got the church board, and we have these other teams working. How do they interact with each other? How does that fit together?
Sure. And that's really a great question for where we are in the stage of our life at Rockbridge, because many churches don't ever really find a clear and definitive way as to which the pastor and whatever church board they call work together. And so many times you have conflicting interests and you don't have people on the same page, and so therefore the community is not impacted by that church. And so we're at a great stage because we get to look at this with fresh eyes. For most of us, we've never been a part of a new church before.
Right.
If we've been a part of a church, we've been a part of churches that have already had an organizational structure set in place where we didn't have to do the grunt work of figuring out how to do it.
Right.
And so this is a great opportunity, maybe a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for some of us, maybe twice in a lifetime for others, but to be a part of something to where we can really put our hands around, okay, what's the role of the pastor and what's the role of the church board, and how do they mesh together in such a way for us to do what God's calling us to do. And so the church board really, in this way, acts as a representative body of the church as a whole. And so we don't operate by pure democracy. If that was the case, then every decision we'd have to go for a vote before all the partnership.
Right.
And we all know that's not effective.
Right.
And that's really not what God's calling us to do anyway. He calls certain people out to be leaders in such a way so the overall health of the group is made whole. If you go back to Acts chapter 6, and we talked about this before, it talked about how the church was growing and people were getting excited for Jesus Christ, and yet there were people that were coming up to the apostles. These people had firsthand knowledge of Jesus Christ, and they said, "You're neglecting us."
Right, right.
And the apostles said, "Okay, our job is to preach the gospel, spread the word. So let's get some other people to take care of this administrative function of making sure no one falls through the gaps."
Right.
And so they assigned deacons. Now, we don't call them deacons at Rockbridge Church because as part of the United Methodist Church, they use a little bit different lingo for that. But the same function applies, that the administrative board really makes sure that nothing falls through the cracks.
Yeah.
They act as an administrative board. They act as almost boots on the ground. If the pastor says, "Hey, we need to go over there," then that's done in consultation with the board, but the board also can come back and say, "Okay, that sounds great, and we want to go there, but have you thought about the finances?
Sure.
And have you thought about the hiring and firing? Have you thought about how we're going to use this church facility and the grounds in the future use?" And so we work in collaboration with one another, partnership with one another,
Sure.
so that we can do everything that God's calling us to do.
And so an assumption then that has to be a part of this is strong communication. We talked about that at the retreat. But it's not just communication among church board members or among the finance team members in the church board, but that the pastor needs to be communicating both out and receiving communication from this group as well. So,
Right.
because if we as the church board are representative first, and if we're boots on the ground as well, then there has to be a dialogue, right, between the church board and the pastor about, well, you know, you're saying go over here, but we also need to remember that if we're going to do that, then here are some other factors that
Sure.
we need to think about as well, right?
Well, and you can go to two extremes on that. One is the pastor can act essentially as a dictator, and you really don't need a church board to have to do
Sure.
that. So
Sure.
if the pastor in essence is saying, "Church board, we're going to do this, and I just need your stamp of approval,"
Right.
let's just save everybody time and not have a church board.
Amen.
And let's just keep on going. But that's also very limiting. The other extreme is where the church board has so much power that the pastor is neutered,
Right.
and the pastor can't do anything. And so you have a group of people that may well have a vision for the church, but there's no clear line of, okay, what's going on here?
Right.
And so I think a healthy relationship is one where you mutually submit to one another. I think that's in the Bible. You mutually submit to one another, and you do it in such a way that you keep the greater good in mind. You know, we're each given different gifts for the greater good, and I want what's best for the church, and we need people, biblical leaders on the church board who wants what's best for the church.
Sure.
And so if we're all of the same mind, we can communicate with one another.
Right.
And that's where trust is built also.
Sure.
And if we do that, then that's a great relationship to move this church forward as we seek to transform the community.
Outstanding. So, there we have our first conversation about what's the role of the pastor as we continue to learn and grow together here at Rockbridge Church. Remember that there are some questions attached to this that we would love for you to go through so that we can continue this dialogue as we try to figure all this out together. It's a pleasure to get to be able to do this today, and we hope that you found it beneficial. Have a great day.